Eagles, good to talk to you guys today. All right, so as you can see up here on my whiteboard, we're going to go over Congress today. And I know there's a lot of bubbles to fill in, but this actually isn't all that bad once we get it done. So I have two concept maps for you guys that I'd like you to kind of memorize, kind of learn. So the Congress one, it's a little bit bigger. But if you can draw this, if you can actually go through and draw this concept map, I think it'll really help you on your AP exam. I've had students in the past say, man, I kind of choked when I started my AP test, but they practiced drawing the Congress concept map, and then so they just kind of scribbled it down really quick while they were taking their test, and it was pretty easy for them to remember. It kind of got their mind going. So yes, hopefully you can see this on this recording I'm doing. Hopefully the glare off the whiteboard isn't too bad, but I would like you to follow along with me and draw this as I go and practice it. This is a good tool to get you ready for your AP exam. It kind of summarizes the Congress unit of study. Okay, so today we're going to go over Congress, which is our legislative branch. Now in the Constitution, it starts with Article 1, which is the legislative branch. So the framers of the Constitution, they really did feel that Congress was the most important branch. Now, you may argue that the presidency has more power. You may argue about, Article 3 that talks about the judiciary. But at the beginning of this whole party, the framers were like Congress, the people, consent of the governed, right? That's where power should be held. So they put Article 1 in the Constitution to describe Congress and its powers and its structure. Okay, so let's start with structure, actually. Our legislative branch has two chambers, or two houses of Congress. It's called bicameralism. Okay, bicameralism, which means we're going to have a House of Representatives and we're going to have a Senate. Now, before I start filling in the bubbles and differentiating between the House and the Senate, the first thing you need to be able to tell me is why. Why do we have a bicameralism, right? Why do we have a bicameral Congress? Why do we have two houses? Okay, first, federalism, the Great Compromise, right? If you go back into that original Constitutional Convention, you had a discussion between the large states and the small states. Remember, the large states wanted it based off of population. Representation needs to be based off population. So the more people you have in your state, the more representatives you'll have at the federal government, and thus you'll have more power. Obviously, a state like Virginia is going to want power in Congress to be based off of population. Well, hold on there. You got some small states like New Jersey, and they're like, whoa, we're not going to agree to this new Constitution if we're just going to get outvoted by Virginia all the time. So there has to be a way to create an equal platform for states to be represented at the federal level. So the Great Compromise was put into place, and I know we've already covered this. This is kind of review, but essentially, small states are going to be happy because there's going to be a Senate that will be based off of equal representation, which means regardless of the number of people that live in your state size, right? Regardless of that, every state is going to get two senators. So Virginia has equal power as New Jersey. And in more modern times, California has equal power to Utah, even though California has like 40 million people that live there, where Utah's like 3 or 4 million people that live here, right? So much smaller state in terms of population, but equal power in the Senate. However, that's kind of unfair to those big states, right? I mean, now those folks that live in Virginia, or in the modern example, California, their vote seems watered down compared to those smaller states. This is where the balance comes in with the House of Representatives. A state like California, they're going to have over 50 representatives, right? Whereas a state like Wyoming that only has, 500,000 or so people that live there, they're only going to have one representative. So the big states will dominate in the House, right? And it's kind of fair, but federalism, state sovereignty, the idea of having a state put on a pedestal is represented in the Senate with that equality to senators. So you have a bicameral legislature, a House and the Senate, to balance the interest between large states and small states. What's the other one? It's a check and balance. We want checks and balances, right? The framers wanted it to be difficult to pass laws, right? So to pass a law, it's got to go through a committee, right, and then get voted on by the full chamber. But then it goes to the other chamber. Then it's got to go through committee. Then get voted on by the chamber. And then it's got to go to the president or governor at the state level. It's a nightmare to pass legislation. It really is. And the framers wanted it that way. They wanted it to be difficult to pass laws. So they created this scenario where you have checks and balances in Congress. You have a bicameral or two-chamber body. Okay, so now that you can explain why we have a two-chamber or bicameral Congress, I want to go over the differences between the House and the Senate. And going over these differences, we'll be able to differentiate why the House governs the way it does versus the Senate. Okay, so let's start with the House of Representatives. Now again, I do want you to follow along and fill these in with me. This first bubble right here, we'll put population, okay, and I'll just abbreviate it and put pop. I'll put 2 years right here. That's the term lengths. We'll get to that in a second. I'm going to put 435 right there, the number 435. Over here, I'm going to put the word speaker, and I'll explain that in just a second. Right here, I'm going to put the word reapportion. Reapportion. Then I'm going to put the word gerrymandering right here. Gerrymandering. Sorry about my handwriting. Right here, I'm going to put closer to the people. Closer to the people. All right, now write that down with me. Let's explain it. First, right here, population. The House of Representatives is based off population. I just explained this when we talked about bicameralism. So the more people you have, the more representatives you will have in the House of Representatives. Okay? The House serves 2-year terms. Short term, you're always campaigning. If you're a member of the House, you never can quite get that comfortable because you always have an election coming around the corner, right? The number 435 represents the number of districts in the United States currently. Now, this number can change. The Reapportionment Act of 1929 set the number 435 where it is today. And the reason it's at 435 is because it got to the point where the House was getting too big. I mean, when you have 435 people trying to figure out legislation, it can be kind of a mess. So, 100 years ago or so, they're like, yeah, let's just cap it at 435. Okay. Now I put reapportionment right there. I'll explain that in a second. Before we get over there, let's stick to this. Okay, 2-year terms. I put the phrase closer to the people next to 2 years. Here, let me fill in the Senate really quick, just so I can kind of explain it. On the Senate, I'm going to put equal representation. And I'll just put equal rep, right? I'll put 6 years right here. And then right here, I'm going to put 100. Okay. Right here, I'm going to put continuous body. And I'm going to abbreviate. And then I'll put direct election right here. And I'm going to put filibuster right there. Okay. So I filled in the House and the Senate. Now let's talk about the differences. Population versus equal representation. Again, House is based off population, where the Senate is going to have 2 senators per state, which equals 100. Okay? Now, right off of the bat, when you look at 435 versus 100, you immediately identify the fact that the Senate, an individual senator, is going to have more influence and power than a member of the House, because 1 out of 435 is like a drop in the bucket, right? Everybody's a member of the House, it seems like. There's a million of you folks. Whereas a senator, 1 out of 100, I mean, I know it's still 1 out of 100, but if you become a committee chairperson in the Senate, wow, you can have a lot of influence and authority. I watched a confirmation hearing this week, and that was in the Senate, and I knew all of the senators that were talking. I just knew them. I knew the senator from different states because I'm familiar with them. If I were to watch a committee hearing in the House of Representatives, I'd be like, who are these people? You know, I just don't know who they are. There's so many of them, and they switch out so often. But senators, an individual senator can have substantially more influence compared to a member of the House. All right, now let's compare term lengths. A 2-year term versus a 6-year term. Right there is going to show a difference in how these folks govern. Okay, so a member of the House is always campaigning, right? Because their next election is right around the corner. Well, how does that translate to them being closer to the people? It's because you can't afford to not listen to your constituents back home in your district. Because if you ignore them, they're going to get frustrated with you, and there's an election always coming up. So you have to constantly engage with your constituencies back home in your district so that you know their wants and their needs. And the framers designed it that way so that members of the House are the true members that are closest to the people, true representatives that know what the people want, and they're going to govern that way. This is good because it leads to the representative being attached and engaged with their constituencies. We want this. We want the people to rule, and if they're held accountable every 2 years, they're going to be closer to the people. Hold on, though. We don't want people just constantly worried about the heat of the moment and not look at the long-term perspective of things, right? So let's say you take a federal judge. A federal judge nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate, is going to serve a life term. Well, you want a body to confirm that appointment who's thinking long term, right? You don't want somebody who's up for re-election every 2 years that's constantly worried about current events. You want a body that's a little bit more slow, cautious, and deliberate with those kinds of decisions. And that's why the framers established the Senate at a 6-year term. This is job security, baby. You get elected as a senator, you've arrived in the upper, more mature chamber, right? So a 6-year term is going to lead to the Senate governing differently than the House of Representatives. They're kind of the body that's going to slow down, take a look at everything, take a deep breath, and the framers wanted it that way because, yes, they want people to be engaged, or they want representatives to be engaged with the folks, but they still want a body that's going to look at the long term, and that's where the 6-year long term of the Senate comes into play. All right, let's continue moving between the two chambers. Over here I have the phrase reapportion. What does that mean? Well, if the House is based off of population, populations are shifting all the time, right? The state of Utah is growing considerably. So you've got to you got to divide up this number more often so that it is true, fair representation. It's every 10 years. Every 10 years, there is a reapportionment of the 435 seats. It's called the decennial census, right? So they determine a state's population, and then after all the state's populations have been determined, they divide up the number 435, and you're awarded your number of representatives in the House. Now the number if Utah were to gain a seat in the House of Representatives, the number doesn't jump up to 436. It stays at 435. It's just a state, a different state, whichever one it may be, loses a seat, and we would gain a seat in that scenario. So every 10 years, we reapportion the number 435. But what is this word I have right here? Gerrymandering. Okay, gerrymandering. I put that there because who's in charge of drawing the congressional district lines? Okay, now certainly you've seen a map of the United States and all the districts. If not, I'll provide one for you. But the lines are drawn kind of funky in all the states. Who draws those lines? The people that draw the congressional district lines, the actual geographic lines, people in charge of drawing those, is the state legislature. Okay, so the states are in charge of drawing the district lines. Now, they can draw them in a way that favors their political party, and this is the process of gerrymandering. So let's say, for example, you have a state where all of the Democrat voters, or the majority of the Democrat voters, are in one big city, like the capital city. And let's say the Republican Party controls the state legislature. They could actually draw the district lines in a way where they all intersect in that one area and divide up the Democrat voters, right? And then they can win all of the districts. Or let's say there's so many Democrat voters in this one city, they can just draw a district around that one city and sacrifice one of the seats to win the rest of them. Okay? That's gerrymandering. You're drawing the district lines in order to give your political party that's in charge of the state legislature an advantage, okay, in voting numbers. Now, I know in my example right there, I said that the Republicans would gerrymander. Guys, I'm not going to get into that right now, but both political parties have engaged in gerrymandering. So I just want you to be aware of why they gerrymander, or what gerrymandering is, okay, and how it's done, and I just described it. If you have any questions, let me know. But I also want you to be able to explain to me why gerrymandering can be bad. Okay, now let me throw this out at you really quick. If you've gerrymandered some districts to the point where they are just easily going to be won, right? So however they're gerrymandered, that creates a scenario where that district, if it's not competitive, right, then the incumbent will just keep winning re-election by sticking to one side of the ideological line. That leads to partisanship. Why? Well, if I'm a member of Congress and I'm from a political party that has given me an advantage in drawing the district lines, I only have to do what my constituents in my district want, or my base. I don't have to listen to the other side. I can just have partisan legislation be my thing, and I'll keep getting reelected. But hold on, let's say I was in a district that was competitive, where it was split, pretty close, Republican-Democrat. Now I'm going to govern a little bit differently, right? Because I know that I can't just sit on one side of the ideological line with my work in Congress, but rather I have to move toward the middle a little bit, try to get some votes from the other side of the ideological line, or get those moderate voters to vote for me, which means I will vote a certain way and work a certain way and govern a certain way when I'm in government. So if I'm in a competitive district, it may lead to more bipartisanship rather than partisanship. Okay, if you have any other questions about gerrymandering, please let me know. All right, so population, 2-year terms, 435, reapportionment. This last one right here says speaker, and I just want to highlight the top member of the House of Representatives, and arguably the most powerful person in government other than the president, right? You have your Senate Majority Leader, who's also very powerful, but you have your Speaker of the House. The majority party will elect a leader, and that is the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House sets the agenda, sets the platform of the party in the House of Representatives. Speaker of the House is a very powerful person. They can control essentially all pieces of legislation that come through the House of Representatives in one way or another. Now, there is no Speaker of the House in the Senate. Rather, you have the Senate Majority Leader, and they act somewhat like the Speaker of the House. But we'll get to that stuff in a little bit. Okay, that's our House. Let's make sure we go through the Senate. Again, equal representation, 6-year terms, a little bit more slow and cautious with their governing. 100 senators, meaning an individual senator can have more influence compared to the House. But what does this mean out here? Sorry about my handwriting. That does say continuous, and I abbreviated it, body, right? Continuous body. And then I got the number 33 right there. What does that mean? Here's what it means. Every 2 years, we have an election. Every 2 years, we have an election to elect all 435 members of the House. Some years we elect a president, midterm elections we don't. So what's going on with the Senate? Every 2 years, there are senators up for election, but it's only 1/3 of those seats. So it's 33, and then 1 year, 34. Why does that mean equal a continuous body? Well, if only 33 seats are up every 2 years, then you don't see big power swings in the Senate. It's stable. To switch who controls the chamber is actually more difficult than you would think in the United States Senate, because only 1/3 of the seats are up at a time, whereas in the House of Representatives, all 435 seats are up every 2 years. So you can, the majority of the chamber can switch very often in the House compared to the Senate. So it's a more stable, continuous body. Direct election, what does that mean? Well, I put 17th out here. That means the 17th Amendment. All right, direct elections. Here's what happened. Originally, the framers created the scenario where senators were going to be chosen by state legislatures. So the states pick their senators. That led to some corruption. I won't go into that today. We'd be talking here all day about it. I'll just move on. Basically, there was some corruption. This is during the Gilded Age period, post Civil War, post Reconstruction era. And the people were like, you know what? We don't like corruption. We don't like bribery. Essentially, senators were bribing state legislatures to get a seat in the Senate. We don't want that. So the people invoked Article 5 of the Constitution and added an amendment to the Constitution, our 17th Amendment, which means senators will now be directly elected by the people. Or in other words, if I'm running for Senate, everybody goes and votes. Whoever gets the most votes is the winner, and they become a senator. So the people will directly elect the senator rather than the state legislatures picking the senator. Okay, right up here I put filibuster and cloture. What does that mean? Okay, so the Senate does not have time limits for debate on bills. The House does, and we'll get to committees in a second. But the House will have, like the Rules Committee, there's committees in both chambers, but the House is governed a little different. The rules of the House, basically, you don't have these unlimited times to talk about bills, whereas in the Senate, you do have unlimited time. So when a senator takes the floor to start debating a bill, they have the right to talk and talk and talk and talk. And they can talk about their favorite color, they can talk about the weather, they can read the phone book, they can read Green Eggs and Ham, which did happen. If you don't believe me, Google it. Just Google Ted Cruz, Green Eggs and Ham, Senate floor. Go ahead. Pause me right now and test it out. Anyway, you can get up there and start talking about whatever the heck you want, and what you're doing is clogging up the work of the Senate. You're trying to delay legislative action as a political tactic. Maybe you don't approve the bill, maybe your political party's the minority party, and you're trying to clog everything up, and this is your only tool that you can use. Now, there are rules in the Senate regarding it, and I won't go into those details right now. Instead, I just want you to know what filibuster is, and I want you to tell me how to end it. Okay, you can invoke what's known as cloture. That says cloture, C-L-O-T-U-R-E. You can invoke the cloture rule, which is a supermajority, 60 votes, and you can stop the filibuster. Okay, so if you get that vote, that supermajority, 60 out of 100, you can invoke cloture and stop the filibuster. Okay, so that's the differences between the House and the Senate. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. All right, I'm going to move up to committees over here in this top corner. All right, first thing I'm going to write in committees is oversight. Okay, oversight. What does that mean? Okay, we'll get into that. Second thing I'm going to write is divide the work. Okay, divide the work. All right, so let's talk about those two things before I fill in the other bubbles at the top. First, divide the work. There's lots of laws that are proposed every session of Congress. Tons of them. How can a member of Congress have so much time to read all that legislation? They can't. There's not enough hours in the day. So in order to properly govern, you need to properly divide the work. So in order to divide the work, you create committees in Congress. Now when you're elected to Congress, if you're a senator or a member of the House, you'll be assigned to some committees. And then you'll only focus on legislation within those committees. Okay, now, some committees are going to be more prominent than others, and those are the committees you want to get on to be more powerful. Okay, I'll talk about oversight in a second, but first, I want you to write down the types of committees. All right, first right here, put standing. Okay, so there's standing committees, joint committees, let's see, conference committees, and what am I missing? What am I missing? I forgot. Oh, duh, select committees. Okay, select. All right, right here I put standing, and then out above standing I put rules and ways and means. Those are some examples of some standing committees. Now, these two committees that I gave as your examples are committees that are in the House of Representatives. The Rules Committee, for example, sets the legislative calendar for the House of Representatives. It's a very powerful and prominent committee in the House of Representatives. If you want to be influential in the House, get on the Rules Committee because you set the legislative calendar. There is no Rules Committee in the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader kind of acts as the Rules Committee, but because the House is so big, yes, there is a Rules Committee that sets the calendar, sets time limits for debate on bills. It essentially sets the legislative agenda for the House. It's a prominent standing committee. If it's a standing committee, that means it's permanent, and it's very prominent. Another example is the Ways and Means Committee. Okay, that handles tax laws in the House of Representatives. I could have put some Senate committees on there, like the Senate Judiciary Committee, Finance Committee, but I just picked those as a couple examples. All right, a joint committee is where House members and senators work together, joint committee to propose an amendment. A select committee will be established to handle like a current event, and once that issue is resolved, the committee will be dissolved. And then you have what's known as a conference committee. Now, when you pass legislation, it has to go through both chambers of Congress, right? Okay, so let's say a bill passes the House, it gets over to the Senate, and then the Senate passes it, but it's a little different than the bill that was passed in the House. Well, rather than start the process of starting all over, they instead create a conference committee where both House members and senators come together in this conference committee. They work out the differences in the bill before they send it to the president. That's the purpose of a conference committee. All right, so standing, I'm going to put a star next to it because those are the most prominent committees. If you want to be powerful in Congress, get on a standing committee. Now, there's a couple other things I haven't talked about: oversight and expertise. When you get assigned to a committee, you're going to be assigned to a committee based off of your area of expertise. But there's another reason why you're assigned to a committee. The more prominent committees are going to get people who have more seniority. Okay, so if you've been reelected in the House a few times, it's likely you can get on a prominent standing committee. Whereas if you're a rookie member of the House or a rookie senator, they'll probably send you to a subcommittee first where you go fetch coffee and donuts. As soon as you get reelected, little guy, then you can come back and join, our standing committee, right? So if you're a rookie member of Congress, you're not going to get on a prominent standing committee. It goes to senior members of Congress first, and then you're going to be assigned based off of your area of expertise. Oversight. Congress has oversight authority. What does that mean? It means Congress can do things to make sure that the bureaucracy is acting within the boundaries it sets. Or in other words, when Congress passes a law and hands it off to the executive branch, the bureaucracy, they expect that law to be implemented a certain way. Well, the bureaucracy may not implement that law the same way Congress intends. So they've got to be able to check to see if people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's their oversight authority. You have the Oversight Committee in Congress. The Oversight Committee can call people to testify. It can withhold funding. It can basically check to see if the bureaucracy is implementing laws properly. Okay, so I think we got committees pretty good. Let's jump over here to the other side and talk about expressed powers. Thanks for listening to me, guys. I know this is a little bit longer one, but we're essentially summarizing a big unit of study here. Expressed powers. Now, we know the difference between expressed powers and implied powers, right? So we talked about the necessary and proper clause. that gives Congress the authority to implement laws that are necessary and proper, or it gives the implied powers. What does expressed powers mean, though? When I say expressed, I mean it's specifically mentioned in the Constitution. It's actually written out. Now, can I get more specific? You bet I can. Article 1, Section 8 contains the majority of the expressed powers. Okay, what are the expressed powers in Article 1, Section 8? I'm not going to give you all of them on the concept map, but I'm going to give you several, such as declare war. Declare war. Okay. Power to tax. Power to borrow. Power to coin money or currency. And power to regulate business between the states or the commerce power. Those are some examples. There are more. They're in your note packet. I do expect you guys to know the Article 1, Section 8 expressed powers, but just to get your mind rolling, we wrote a little list right here. Declare war. The president has an advantage in foreign policy matters. Congress isn't completely out of it, though. They can, we'll talk about treaties here in a minute, but declaring war, the president is in charge of the armed forces. They are the commander-in-chief. But they can't go to war without Congress approval. So declare war is an express power. The express power to tax and borrow. Okay. Now I put power of the purse right here and entitlements. Let me explain why I put these right here. The taxing and borrowing power that Congress holds gives them control of the money, right? So that means they have the power of the purse. So if you ever watch a presidential debate and they say they're going to do this or that, okay, they can say they're going to do this or that, but unless they get Congress to pay for it, it's not going to happen. So remember, Congress has the power of the purse, and that is one of the main checks and balances that Congress has over the bureaucracy or the presidency or overall. They fund things, right? Now over here I put entitlements. Why did I put entitlements? This is just a reminder because we talked about the federal budget process in this unit of study. It's a very tedious back and forth between the president and Congress with how we're going to spend the nation's money every year, right? We have a large national debt. Why do we have this? Well, we have to spend stuff, and we have to buy and sell. Summarize it. I don't want to get too off track here, but we spend a lot more money than we bring in. Why don't we just stop spending the money though? Okay, there's some programs that take up the biggest piece of the spending pie for our budget, and those things are entitlements like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those programs are more expensive than any other program that we have in the United States, including the military. Now, yes, military is a big part of the federal budget, sure, but Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those pieces of the budget are huge. So I put entitlements out there just to highlight that is the biggest part of the budget. Now, I won't go over it in too much detail right now, but basically, as entitlement spending grows, discretionary spending items get less love. So what's a discretionary item? Well, the National Park Service, right? We want to fund our national parks, but if you have to pick between cutting Social Security and cutting funding to the national park, you're going to cut funding to the national park. That's a discretionary item, right? The entitlement programs or your mandatory spending items will take precedent, and as a result, we have borrowed a lot more money than we brought in. Okay, currency, coining money, and commerce, regulating business between the states. You guys have been great. Thank you. I know I'm long-winded here. Don't worry, we're almost done. Let's move to the other side of the board. Let's talk about some other powers or non-legislative powers. First, I mentioned Article 5 earlier in this presentation. Article 5 is the ability to amend the Constitution, right? Remember, it's just a reminder, how do we do that? Congress will propose amendments. In order to get the amendment passed through Congress, it requires a 2/3 vote in both chambers. 2/3 vote in both chambers. Now, I didn't draw it out here, I'll do it really quick. And then 3/4 of the states are required to ratify that amendment. Okay? All right here I put Senate. Now remember, the Senate is a more mature, prestigious body. So the framers wanted specific things to go to the Senate because they can be a little bit more cautious and deliberate. What specific things does the Senate handle that the House doesn't? First, I'm going to put treaties right here. When we make a treaty with another nation, it's the Senate that will approve that treaty. Famous historical example is the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, right? When Woodrow Wilson came back from the Paris Peace Conference, Treaty of Versailles is on the table. The United States Senate did not approve it. Therefore, we never joined the League of Nations, and the League of Nations kind of fell apart. It's kind of a blunder, but yeah, the Senate, they have to approve treaties. What's another one? Judges. Okay, all judges must be approved by the Senate. Now, federal judges are nominated by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and they hold a lifetime appointment. That's a pretty important job. It's the United States Senate that confirms these judges. What else does the Senate do in terms of confirmation? Cabinet members. Okay, cabinet members. Cabinet members. The Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Education, the head of the FBI. You have all of these departments that are very important and critical in the executive branch. The people who head up these departments need to have some sort of approval from the people, right? And that's the Senate. The Senate will approve cabinet members in the president's cabinet. Right up here, I want you to write the word impeachment. Impeachment. Now, impeachment is a main check and balance that we have in our government. I know that impeachment normally goes to you associate it with the president. It's not just the president, you guys. Members of the House can be impeached. Senators can be impeached. Judges can be impeached. But what is the impeachment process? 2 parts. So you hear the phrase, Bill Clinton was impeached. Donald Trump was impeached, right? Richard Nixon was impeached. Nixon was not actually impeached. He resigned before he was impeached, but he was going to be, right? What does that mean, impeached? Well, yes, Trump, Clinton, they were impeached, but they were not convicted. So there's 2 parts to impeachment. First, the House of Representatives will accuse, right? That is the actual impeachment. If the president's committed a crime, the House will draw up articles of impeachment, and that is the accusation. And it just takes a majority vote. But it's the Senate, and it takes a supermajority vote to convict. So the Senate will conduct the trial. Okay, so yes, Bill Clinton was impeached. Donald Trump was impeached, which means the House accused them of a crime. But there's 2 parts, right? The Senate conducts the trial, and both of these examples that I'm giving to you, they were acquitted. They were found not guilty by the Senate. So they were not removed from office. Nixon, it was obvious he was going to be impeached and convicted, so he just resigned before that process went through. Major check and balance, impeachment. All right, you guys have been with me now for a while. I have no idea how long I've been talking because I can't see the clock from me staring at this camera. But hopefully you can see this. Hopefully my handwriting isn't too bad. My R's are kind of weak sauce there. I got one more thing to go, and then we're done. And it's the love-hate relationship of Congress. If you look at Congress approval ratings, you will notice that Congress as a whole has low approval ratings. Always. So we hate Congress, but yet we re-elect our members of Congress at a very high rate. Like 90% these folks get re-elected. What the heck is going on? It's a love-hate relationship. So incumbency is the key. So the first thing I'll have you write is incumbency. What does that mean? It means the person already in office. Okay, so the incumbent is running for re-election, right? Incumbents get re-elected at a very high rate. But if we dislike Congress so much, why do they keep getting elected? Well, Pork barrel spending is one reason. What is pork barrel spending? Okay, so when legislation is passed, sometimes members of Congress will attach spending items to bills. They don't necessarily go with the bill. They kind of do, but essentially it's a way to bring home money back to your state or district in legislation. Pork barrel spending, right? Now, pork barrel spending is sometimes referred to as the glue of legislation, where somebody, they're going to get money back to their district or state for their whatever project. If you live in a state and your member of the House or senator brings back some pork for your state, you're very happy. And as a result, you're going to vote for that person, right? But when another state does it, or when another congressperson brings home some pork to their state, you kind of point your finger and you're like, that's wasteful spending, what the heck, right? So we dislike Congress as a whole, but we love our members of Congress, right? So that's why I put this phrase right here. They're dirtbags. We hate Congress, but we love our dirtbag, right? They're dirtbags, but our, in quotations, dirtbag. And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be funny. I don't really think members of Congress are dirtbags. I'm just trying to be comical. But it's just a phrase. They're dirtbags, but our dirtbag. Meaning, we hate Congress. They're always spending money. But not our member of Congress. They're always bringing home, the stuff for us. And that's your pork barrel spending. So it is a love-hate relationship. Okay, now I just spoke for a while, and I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Hopefully I did, but read the note packet so make sure you understand all the details of Congress. This is just kind of a basic overview of the whole thing. But if you can draw this thing and kind of in your mind go through what I went through, you'll be in good shape for the AP test. Yes, there's a lot more on your notes that's on this concept map. I know that. This is just kind of an overview, and if you can do this, it'll be really beneficial. All right, you guys, I don't think I missed anything. Nope. Okay, I'll go turn off the camera. Thank you.